What's an urban legend you know that's actually true? The Great Potato Salad Massacre back in 1976. Small Alabama town. Middle of July. Soaring temperatures. Southern Baptist Church summer picnic. Some husband put the potato salad in the back trunk the night before, didn't know it needed to be refrigerated. At the picnic he puts it on the food table. Everyone eats it. These are Southern Baptists after all. An hour later the fuse was lit, so to speak. Nay, 100 fuses were lit. The men were playing softball. The women were trading pie recipes. The kids were swimming in the pond. Mayhem ensues. Gastro explosions erupt in every last one of those that ate the salad. The massacre is what happened in their britches and to the outhouses the lucky few got to use. Everyone else either decimated and desecrated the bushes, the trees, or their car seats, as they foolishly thought they could make it home in time. How do I know it's true? My grandpa is the man that was in charge of the potato salad. He didn't eat any. But my grandma reminds him all the time since they were excommunicated from the church. That one had me on the edge of my seat. You get kicked out of a Baptist church for some time like that? Must have been even worse than I imagined. The Funhouse Mummy. Elmer McCurdy was a bank and train robber killed in a shootout in 1911. His body was embalmed and put on display. It ended up going on tour, even being used in a couple of films. His body went missing in the 1960s. It turned up again in a fun house that was going to be used for the filming of an episode of the $6 Million Dollar Man. The crew were removing mannequins. When the arm fell off one of the mannequins, and they noticed a bone sticking out, the police were called. McCurdy's body was buried in Guthrie, Oklahoma. In my college town there was one homeless guy who everyone kind of knew of. He stood out because he always wore a black suit with no shirt and walked around barefoot with no baggage or shopping cart or anything. A rumor started going around that he was actually a famous painter whose work sold for thousands, that he had a patron that took care of him, and he just lived like a vagrant out of preference and schizophrenia. Most people called bullshit, including myself, until I met someone that knew his name, William Laga. I remember that guy. I was at UCLA in the mid-90s and saw that dude walking around all the time. Never said a word to anybody, just walked around in a suit and carrying an old camera. I used to think, for a homeless guy he's pretty clean shaven, but left him alone. Wild story. I never heard the painter rumors, but I also never heard anybody say anything bad about him. There used to be a rich hippie cult in the woods, nearish my town in the 60s. Ultra rich, but think drum circles and cocaine. So much cocaine. One day they just disappeared. Abandoned the compound, nobody knew why. They just all left overnight. Assumptions ranged from drug raid incoming, to a murder in the compound, you name it. Most don't think it was real anymore, or it was just some weirdo eccentric dude, and the story took a life of its own. I know it's real, 'cause I've been to the compound. Noticed many years back a weird road when driving past the area for work. Overgrown, and not on Google Maps. Took my lunch ciggy break right there and then, and went to check it out. The place was massive, with stables and several large houses, now kind of caved in. Inside everything was still like it was back then. Furniture, diningware, clothes, magazines. Like someone had just left for store, minus 30 plus years of mildew and moss. Not a single car in the garages though. Raymond Ray Robinson, October 29, 1910 to June 11, 1985, was a severely disfigured man whose years of nighttime walks made him into a figure of urban legend in western Pennsylvania. Robinson was so badly injured in a childhood electrical accident that he could not go out in public without fear of creating a panic, so he went for long walks at night. Local tourists, who would drive along his road in hopes of meeting him, called him the Green Man or Charlie No-Face. They passed on tales about him to their children and grandchildren, and people raised on these tales are sometimes surprised to discover that he was a real person who was liked by his family and neighbors. Wish I could have been around the dude, got some genetic oddness myself, and would love to be friends with someone who's kind of a fellow hermit. Have you heard the story of the robber who fell through the skylight, sued the homeowners and won? It's true, but it was a business, and it wasn't a robber. It was a junkie jumping from one adjacent building to the next, and landed on the skylight that gave way. He's lucky to be alive. He fell 2 stories. Also, the insurance company settled, so I wouldn't say he won a court case per se. It was my dad's family business. When I was a kid, another neighbor kid broke into our garage, set up our kiddie pool, 1 foot deep, filled it with water. Then he took our 6-foot step ladder out of the garage, proceeded to climb to the top of it in an attempt to jump into the pool. Except he slipped, fell off, and broke his arm. We weren't home at the time, but a neighbor witnessed the whole thing, even told the kid to stop. The kid's parents sued my parents and our homeowner's insurance settled with them. Whole thing was ridiculous. The filing is full of lies. It says I bullied him into doing it. I wasn't home, I was with my parents, and we had proof of that. Insurance didn't care, they settled it. The angel glow. After the Battle of Shiloh, it was reported wounded soldiers would glow with a bluish-green hue. Many of the soldiers with this glow miraculously recovered from their wounds. The recovery was attributed to angels healing the soldiers. Researchers later discovered the battlefield was full of a bioluminescent bacterium that aided in healing wounds. It isn't a legend yet, but as long as Old Bridge, New Jersey exists, there will be the story of the mysteriously large dump of pasta next to a river that was labeled a terroristic act. Christopher Thomas Knight was an urban legend in Maine, someone who lives in the woods and was sneaking around people's summer cabins. Until he was captured in 2013 after living in the woods for 27 years. Okay, this isn't a known urban legend per se, but once when I was 14 years old I was staying at my grandma's. The house was surrounded on 3 sides by woods forest. I was walking up to the back door when something caught my eye. Sitting on a fallen tree at the edge of the woods was a woodpecker that was at least 5 foot tall. It legit was Woody Woodpecker. I stared at it for a few seconds, then ran inside the house. Now, what makes this better is about 10 years later my stepdad and I were talking randomly about things and the giant woodpecker came up. Before I could finish my story, he interrupted me and said he had seen a 5-foot woodpecker sitting in the same spot a couple years before. He thought he was crazy and never told anyone about it. So the legend of the 5-foot woodpecker was born. The Construction Clown, in Cincinnati, Ohio. I lived in Roselawn and Bridgetown as a kid and started to hear stories from friends about a middle-aged man with a clown collar ruff, hard hat, clown suit, and a construction worker's metal toolbox riding the public transit, all day, without purpose, or milling around construction sites. There's no way that's true, I thought, until one day I took a bus to a local Kroger grocery store for something. As I walked through the parking lot to the store, I saw him standing outside the front doors, toolbox in hand, hard hat, white ruffed collar, bright red sweatshirt, overalls, and work boots painted yellow. It was terrifying. I milled around the parking lot for what felt like forever and noticed that most people coming and going from the store were avoiding the guy. He just stood there, not moving, in the middle of the entry-exit doors of that Kroger. Suddenly, though, he was gone. I didn't see if he walked away or got into a car, or went inside, but I had lost my nerve completely and went back to the bus stop. As soon as I paid the fare and looked up to find a seat, there he was, just sitting in the middle of the bus. I realized the bus had also stopped right in front of the grocery store, so he must have gotten on there. Anyway, I sat 1 row back from him and he didn't move or say a word until it was time for me to exit. I saw him again a few more times in the neighborhood, almost always in passing while he was riding the bus again or standing at various bus stops. He was always dressed in the red sweatshirt and overalls or a full-on clown suit. One time he had a shovel. Then one day he was just gone and people stopped talking about him. Probably 20 years later, when I was in my 30s, I was visiting home and running around the city with my mom. We ended up in Covington, Kentucky doing something or other and were stuck in traffic on MLK Boulevard. As we inched up the road, I looked over and saw a silver bust statue of the guy. It was in front of the Hellman Creative Center. I completely lost it. Nobody, including my mother, had ever believed me when I told stories of seeing this guy when I was a kid, but there's a fucking statue of him right there on the side of the road. When I was about 12 years old, a friend and I were playing in the woods that were known for being creepy. While building a fort, a strange man snuck up behind us and yelled at us to get off his land and never come back, yada yada. It really startled us as we knew the land was a public area and had never been threatened by an adult before. Several years later, we found out he was an actual bank robber, wanted by the FBI for years. We were building our fort a few feet from his stash. For the last several years in Toronto, Gay men have gone missing in the village. The community was convinced it was a serial killer on the loose, but the police said no. These murders' disappearances are unrelated. Turns out that's totally the case, and the guy was killing gay men and burying them in and around the properties he was working at as a groundskeeper landscaper. In the 1970s, there was a homeless man begging for change on the Vegas Strip. A high roller tossed him a $10 chip and walked away. The homeless man went in a casino and sat at a roulette table to place a bet. The dealer didn't want to deal with a homeless person, so asked the pit boss to get rid of him. But the pit boss took pity on him and said he could play until he lost, which he agreed to. Over an hour later, the pit boss came back to the table, surprised to see that the homeless person was still there. And without looking at the table, he demanded to know why he was still there. The dealer simply said, "You said he could play till he lost a bet. He hasn't lost one yet." The pit boss looks at the table and is immediately shocked to see the enormous pile of chips that this homeless man has won. At this point, he accumulated over $20,000 and he was still winning. The homeless man only left the table to use the bathroom and kept ordering food to be brought to the table, as well as ordering top-shelf liquors. He played through the whole night and never lost. It got to the point where the casino couldn't cover his bets. At that point, he finally stopped. When he got off the seat to collect his winnings, he suffered a massive heart attack and dropped dead before he could spend a dime. What's an urban legend you know that's actually true? Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.